Welcome to the only place where real, raw, and vulnerable conversations happen with IFBB Bikini Pros to give you an inside look at their struggles, strategies, mindset, passions, and all of life beyond the stage. This podcast is made to inspire, motivate, and remind competitors and the average gym goer that even the most extreme lifestyles and elite athletes have their ups and downs. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm your host, Celeste Rains-Turk, and now it's time for the Confessions of a Bikini Pro podcast. Today, we are hearing from a vegan chef, owner of Ventura County's Forward Functional Fitness Gym, posing coach, and cookbook author. This pro is a passionate person. She is all about sharing healthy vegan recipes and her personal journey to the stage to inspire others to live an active, healthy, and compassionate lifestyle. She is determined to break the stereotypes that vegans are weak and can't build muscle on a plant-based diet. She has been one of the most requested guests on this show, and when we bumped into each other at the LA Fit Expo, we knew we had to make this episode happen, so I'm very much looking forward to this. Welcome to the show, Natalie Matthews. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and I'm so happy to finally be doing this. I'm so flattered because so many people have reached out saying that they wanted me on the podcast, and I was like, well, she hasn't invited me. I feel like bad, like asking. And finally, like one of the people that messaged me, they're like, no, I'm pretty sure she has. And I'm like, wait, I need to check my messages. So I'm so sorry. It was totally my bad.
No, it's okay. I'm glad. I believe everything happens with perfect timing, and I know we'll have a lot to talk about today, and some really cool things were asked even from the listeners. So before we get into all that, I love starting off every episode by asking, what is one thing you do or a ritual you have right before your heel hits the stage?
Ooh, this is a good one. I just really take a deep breath, and I kind of like look over the audience and I just say thank you. I kind of like take a moment of gratitude just to kind of take it all in and remind myself that, that could be my last time on stage. So I always like treat every time I go out on stage like the last time I'm going to be there, so I can leave it all out there. So that's kind of like something that I do. I just take a few deep breaths and really just own it out there, because nerves can take over sometimes. So it's nice to kind of like pace yourself and, reel it back in.
Yeah, you're right. And it's so crazy to think about how it really could be our last time stepping on stage for whatever reason, whatever circumstance, and to never take it for granted. And that's a really great reminder. So, like I said, we got a lot of listener questions, and normally I sprinkle them throughout the episode. But I figured today we would just do things differently, and I'll go through all of them. And then if the conversation wants to go somewhere off of that, that's great. And then we'll kind of get into everything I've planned. Does that sound good?
Perfect.
Cool. So we'll start with what that was just the very first one submitted, which is, what brand of creatine do you use, and do you use it all year?
So yeah, I do take creatine all year round. I personally found that like amazing benefits from taking creatine, from not taking it my first year of competing. I just found that, my strength was a lot better. And not only that, I definitely brought a different package to the stage. I always was somebody that could get very lean. I have no problem adhering to a diet and like hitting conditioning very well. But my feedback was always like, you just need to look full. And I always brought that like, very shredded look, but my muscles didn't look full. So I feel like from 2018 and 2019, you could definitely see a difference in the fullness that I bring just from taking creatine. And I keep it all throughout my competition prep. I personally do very well with it. I know some girls just take it out, but I tested both with and without, and I find that best with. And for the longest time, I was just taking just the Pure creatine that you can find at any supplement store. But now my sponsors, Live Body, they just came out with a creatine, so now I'm taking theirs.
Oh, cool. And how do you change how much or how many milligrams you take or grams you take?
I only take 3 grams. That's the recommended amount for women, so I don't feel the need to take anything more than that.
Awesome. And I know some people will have more during some times of the year and less later? Do you just keep it 3 grams all year round?
I do, yeah. I haven't cycled off creatine for the last 2 years, honestly. Like I just
Awesome.
I just been feeling so good on it that, and I haven't had any issues with it, that it's just I would say out of all the supplements, that's like my number one.
Really?
And especially for vegan athletes. So creatine is found in red meat. So there have been studies that show that vegan athletes actually perform better on creatine because we don't get it anywhere else.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I did not know that.
Yeah.
So, what is your go-to plant-based protein besides protein powder?
So believe it or not, I only take protein powder once a day. A lot of people just assume that
Hmm.
I'm probably like chugging those protein powders all day long, but I'm not. I actually, and I rather eat it than drink it. So I usually just put it in my overnight oats, or I drink it in my like a protein frappuccino that I like to make, which is cold brew coffee. So those are like my top ways of having it. But I would say plant-based source of protein, tofu, seitan are my top two. I just
Hmm.
love those. And for those that don't know what seitan is, it's kind of like a flour consistency, and you can pretty much make any mock meat with it. You can flavor it however you want. And I like to make these lupini bean seitans with it, and it's so good. It has a high protein content and very little carbs, so it's perfect for prep. When I just want to have like sweet potatoes, I just do a seitan because it has lower carbs.
Yeah, someone else wanted to know like what the best vegan proteins are with low carbs and low fats, or even like the best vegan products that are that way.
Um, Definitely tofu, but if you're having tofu, just have in mind that it is a little bit higher on the fat content. So if you're having tofu, then you might want to skip out on maybe that little extra peanut butter in the morning or something like that. So you just kind of have to get a little bit creative with your macros. So that is always something that I have in mind. Those two are my favorite for prep. They're predictable, they're simple, they're wholesome ingredients. Another great one is edamame beans. You find those like in Asian markets or pretty much any market out there literally has them in the frozen aisle.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm a fan of the lupini beans that come in a pickle form by Brahmi. I don't know if you've seen those. They're so good. Uh,
Pickle form?
yeah, they're like pickled beans. They're delicious. So they're super high in protein, very low in carb, great fiber content, which is really rare to find in a protein. Um, and I just love it. I snack on those. I make recipes with them, or I roast them sometimes, and then I throw them on my salads. So those are some of my other go-tos. Protein pasta is another great one. I love that. It also keeps things a little bit interesting for me, versus just having seitan and tofu. I get very creative with the protein pastas. Like you can find like black bean pasta, edamame pasta, mung bean pasta. There's so many out there. Chickpea ones. What else do I have? Nuts and seeds are great protein like bumpers or add-ons where you could just add them to your meals and they're just going to bump up the protein. And nutritional yeast is something that I use a lot on all of my meals because it just has like, I think it's 3 to 5 grams of protein depending on what brand you get. Has a cheesy taste and it's almost like a flake. It almost looks like a fish
It
food,
does. Yeah.
but it tastes so good and it has that umami feel to it where you don't know why it is that you like it, but you can stop eating it. So I just sprinkle it on everything.
That's awesome. Yeah, I have some of that in my cabinet, and to be honest, I've only used it once, and I was like, I don't taste anything. But I think if I were to start using it more regularly, then I would probably notice like a difference, and I'd be able to taste it more. I'd get to know like how much of it I would need.
Yeah, I use it a lot to make like cheesy sauce. So I mix it with like, for example, if you buy a silken tofu, you can blend that up and it'll have like a very creamy and cheesy like consistency. And I mix like about a quarter cup of nutritional yeast, a little bit of lemon, salt, and to me it tastes like a cheesy sauce once you warm it up. And yeah, I just use that as a dip or a spread. It's really yummy.
That sounds good. And I've heard people use like blended, or I mean, they've used silken tofu for chocolate, or
Yeah.
like,
Oh, it's really good. So same concept. You just blend it in a high-speed blender. You use your sweetener of choice. If you're in prep, you might want to go for stevia. If you're not in prep, maybe maple syrup, um, cacao powder or dark cocoa powder that gives it more like an Oreo taste. And all you do is blend it up, a little bit of vanilla, and that's it. You let it sit overnight in the fridge, and it's like a pudding. It's so delicious. It's just
wow.
protein pudding, literally. And you can add protein powder on top of that if that's something that you want to do. But yeah, it's a great tool to have.
That sounds awesome. It sounds like even if someone wasn't vegan, they'd be able to take these recipes as awesome ways to like mix up their meal plans and their macro plans for prep or even in their improvement season as well.
Absolutely.
So, someone actually wanted to know if your body's ever responded negatively to soy, or if you have any recommendations to someone whose body does respond negatively to soy.
I thank God I haven't. I've always had it, even as a younger girl, without being vegan. I've always consumed soy in my whole entire life, and then when I went vegetarian, I actually went vegetarian 15 years ago.
Wow.
So I've pretty much been meat free half my life. So I did rely heavily on soy items, but I have never ever been sensitive or allergic. But I do recommend that if you're allergic or sensitive to something, just consult your doctor or just eliminate it completely. Because yeah, I would hate for somebody to have like negative effects by having something, you know. There's so many other
Yeah.
things. That's not the only way you can get your protein in. It just happens to be my favorite one. So I eat the things that I enjoy.
That's awesome. Yeah, that makes sense. And I've always been curious myself, and then someone else even asked too, so I was like really glad that they did. But how do you manage and balance your macros on a vegan diet as you get closer to a show?
So it took a little bit of trial, obviously like a trial period to get used to all of that, because my coach, I'm sure you guys know, is Paul Revelia. He's not vegan, but he's so open to having me as an athlete. And I'm so grateful that he never, never judged me or anything like that. And he was like, well, do you prefer having higher carbs or higher fats? Like he always has that conversation with all of his athletes.
Mm.
So we kind of always keep the protein high, especially in a caloric deficit, just to keep satiated. And then the fats and carbs are really depending on that person's lifestyle. So for me, I wanted to kind of make a point and be like, hey, coach, just put me on the macros that you put any other person that wasn't vegan, like I just want to kind of go by then so I can make a point that you could do it, that you can do it.
Nice.
Literally, I have very balanced macros. And then leading up to a show, obviously we cut from carbs because we want to keep those fats at least as 20% of our calories. And yeah, sometimes at the end of prep, it gets really low carb. So I just had to get a little bit creative. So for example, I actually documented my whole prep last year and on my YouTube channel. And I shared a lot of these recipes that I had on a day-to-day basis. And for the most part, I did rely more on seitan and tofu for the reasons that I mentioned before. It was just lower in carb, so I could have more carbs sources in different ways, not just coming from my proteins. Because if I would have picked lentils, that's just pure carbs and then just a little bit of protein. So with seitan and tofu, it allowed me to just have a little bit more freedom and flexibility with my diet. So I would have that. Green beans, I went on a green bean kick last year. So
I love green beans.
there's green beans, zucchini for me.
Love zucchini.
Yeah, I eat a lot. And as far as fats, I stuck with like nuts, seeds, and avocado and dark chocolate. Those were like my top fives for fat. And as far as carbs, I pretty much rarely had rice and potatoes unless it was like a high carb day. But for the most part, I just got to a point where I just wanted to feel full. So I would just pick high volume things like more veggies.
Totally. And because you are vegan and you follow this vegan diet, I've always been curious, like, how do you measure something like tofu when it can be so water, like there's so much water. I find like I have to press out a lot of it. Like, so how do you know that you're measuring it consistently?
So for me, I found this to be the most consistent way. So whatever brand of tofu that I'm buying, I scan it on my Fitness Pal. And instead of using the recommended measurements that they have, what I do, you know how my Fitness Pal has the area where it says you can either measure by ounce, grams, or the whole entire container.
Mm-hmm.
So I log the container as a whole. And then what I do is I put 0.25. So I'm only having a quarter of that container. Or I'll put half, so point, zero point 0.5 if I'm having half of the container. And I found that that way is a lot easier than me worrying about if I'm pressing it, if I'm cooking it. So basically, I'm always having half of a block of tofu. So that is always consistent for me.
Oh, that makes sense. So regardless of if you squeezed a bunch of it out or left some
Exactly.
of it in. Okay.
And it was so much easier when I would prep in bulk. If I would buy 4 blocks of tofu, I knew that that was 8 servings.
That's smart.
Yeah, so it was always consistent in that matter because I know a lot of people think about that, but yeah, I feel like there's no right or wrong way of doing it. I guess is whatever way you started with and just stick with that and be consistent with tracking.
For sure. And you mentioned you actually started as a vegetarian, and someone wanted to know why you chose to go vegan.
I went vegan because my husband actually decided to go vegan first, and it was 8 years ago. So 8 years ago, he went vegan for health reasons, and I still consume dairy. So that was the only thing preventing me from going full vegan. And I grew up in Puerto Rico where in that culture, there's no such thing as vegetarian or vegan. And it was very like looked down upon. And I was like to my husband, I was like, I don't want to go vegan. Like, oh my gosh, I want to be the weird one, like I'm going to be even more weirder. But I honestly wanted to be a supportive wife. And then I kind of fell down the rabbit hole of like learning and educating myself about it. And once I learned about the ethical side, for me, there was no going back. Um, and honestly, like my transformation after going vegan was so huge that I felt so good. And I just never, the thought of going back never crossed my mind. To be completely honest, I experienced weight loss. I experienced just energy. And I also was reversing my hypoglycemia. I got to a point where I no longer had hypoglycemia once I got retested. So that was really good.
Wow, that's awesome.
So
And you mentioned, you grew up in Puerto Rico, and I can't wait to talk to you more about you and the everything that you've been through and accomplished as well. But someone actually asked, and I think this is a great time because you mentioned that it's kind of looked down upon there. So how did you, if you ever had to deal with negative comments from family, like what did you do to address that?
oh, absolutely. I feel like going vegan on itself is not hard at all. Honestly, I think the hardest part is the social aspect and society's view on it, and just not knowing or being educated on it that well. So, automatically people think that you're just gonna die of protein deficiency, or so. They obviously hear about these crazy articles where this person, malnourished a baby and things like that. Like, but what they don't know, like anything, if done right, you can reap benefits. And yeah, it was really mostly about just educating my family members. And at the beginning, yeah, there was a little bit of judgment, like, oh my gosh, she's now going full vegan, what the heck? And
Mhm.
they just saw, honestly, I think, once they saw me and my husband and our transformation, and they saw, wow, they're doing really good. They're exceeding, they're doing so well in their sports and things like that. Because at that time I was surfing, and I was competing in surfing. This was way before bodybuilding.
Mhm.
So I was actually still doing really good, and I was looking good, feeling good. So in their mind, they're like, okay, she's doing amazing. And in fact, after a few years, my sister-in-law went vegan, my brother went vegan,
Wow.
his mother went vegan, because they all saw how great of a transformation we had.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. And we never, we never were like, hey, you guys have to do this. No, we just kind of did our own thing and kind of like led by example.
Exactly. And that's true of so many different lifestyles. And for you, the vegan diet happened to be the one that not only helped you, but then inspired other people and helped them as well. And you touched on something that I loved the way you said it. You said going vegan isn't hard, it's the society's outlook that's hard. So, and you mentioned that that's because of like the concerns about malnourishment, etc. So, what do you do to make sure you are getting all the nutrients, protein your body's needs met? And then how do you communicate that to people who have that perception that, hey, you're not getting what you need?
So first of all, well, as a physique competitor, I'm always concerned about my protein intake. So I always make sure to get enough protein. And whenever I'm like, doing cooking demos or talking at Fit Expos, I always make sure to tell the people, just eat a balanced vegan diet. Like you want to make sure you're not excluding any macronutrients or micronutrients. So when you're building your plate, you want to make sure that it has colors. Colors represent vitamins and minerals, and in today's society, people just want to know, what supplements are you taking so I can get your results? When in reality, you can get, most of your dietary needs through your food, and then your supplements should be the last thing that you're thinking about. So that's what I pretty much say. Just like make sure that you're eating a variety of colorful fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, legumes, like a variety of everything, so you're not missing out. And then take a multivitamin, then take your B12 and your D3 and omegas, just to supplement everything else that you might be missing out on. But yeah, I feel like just people go into it thinking that we just eat lettuce,
Yeah, it's crazy.
or they just pick very high carb foods with missing out on fats or missing out on protein, and that's how you get nutrient deficient. Or they'll go full on plant-based from going from a standard American diet, and what they don't realize is they'll get very full on just plant-based foods, so they'll naturally eat at a caloric deficit without even noticing it. So some people go from that extreme to the other, and they don't notice that they're just not getting enough calories, so they're not meeting their nutrient needs. So it's just about explaining, to each person, especially with their own goals and all of that, and seeing, what they need to do for their personal lifestyle.
That's awesome. I love that perspective, and I just appreciate you sharing that too, because it gives us who are not vegan, or even gives people who need just more ideas in general for meals, or who are wanting to switch, to have that empowered, belief to switch. So I love that. And I would love to know now, like, this is a question that was submitted a while ago, and I love asking everybody now, but what if you like, okay, so if you could only choose one exercise for the rest of your life for your glutes, for your hamstrings, and for your shoulders, what exercise would you pick for each of those?
Oh, for each? Okay.
Uh-huh.
For my shoulders, definitely lateral raises. Because I personally feel like the pump more when I do those.
Do you have a particular way you do them?
I do bent elbows and a little
Okay.
bit, almost like a front raise, but not really. And I do that because I did get a shoulder injury last year, so I had to modify a lot. And I feel like that's the most safe way, if that makes sense, that I feel the most bang for my exercise. And then for my glutes, definitely the hip thrust, heavy hip thrust, not just banded, but banded heavy barbell hip thrust. And what was the other one?
Hamstrings.
For hamstrings, RDLs. I feel those so much. And your last one?
That was it.
Oh, okay, yeah. So this.
How do you hit your how do you do your RDLs? Do you do it with dumbbells, or does it not matter for you?
Now again, because of my shoulder injury, I do them with a barbell. I used to do them with just dumbbells, but I need kind of like the support of my good arm to help me out with the other one.
What happened with your shoulder?
Last year, while I was in prep, actually, I kind of like messed up my left shoulder, and I was with my prep goggles, and I continued training really hard to the point where I pushed it a lot. So I ended up having 2 shoulder impingements and a little bit of a rotator cuff tear. So
Wow.
Yeah, when I finished prep, it kind of hit me like a school bus. Like I was like, I don't know, I guess adrenaline took me all through my prep and I was like pushing through that pain. But then afterwards, I couldn't even like put on a shirt without being in tears. It was really bad.
Mm.
Yeah. So I got PT for about 10 weeks and I just started lifting normal again. So I'm so grateful that I get to do what I love to do because shoulder is my favorite day.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's honestly, shoulder pain is so upsetting.
Yeah.
And I know that feeling of not being able to like lift your arm a certain way, or it could be feeling good in all planes of motion and then one way and it's just like, oh, I can't lift it, I can't move it, like it just hurts. And yeah, I experienced that through playing volleyball. And so I have had to become extra careful with it. But I'm glad you didn't have to get surgery.
I know. I was so grateful for that because the way that it was hurting, I was like, oh shoot, like, I was almost expecting the worst.
Yeah.
But luckily, it was able to be fixed. And now I'm taking very seriously my recovery afterwards, my warming up. Now I warm up for like 10 minutes because I'm like, I'm not getting injured again. I never want to go through that.
Yeah, no, for real. So that's really cool. And especially because you've been an athlete your whole life too, it's interesting to hear, that evolution for you and how now you're paying a lot more attention to your body. And I'm going to branch off of the listener questions and kind of get into what I was, planning and what I wanted to talk to you about. And actually, I'm curious as to how you think being vegan has benefited you as a physique athlete. Like, maybe even why you think it's the best way for you and potentially others, or how, yeah, maybe just how it's beneficial for you.
Yeah, I do like that wording better because I do believe like this lifestyle is amazing. I just never want to seem like I'm
It's
saying like
yes.
it's being like, I feel like everybody just has to find what's right for them. But I am very passionate about it and I wish everybody, would benefit the benefits that I gotten from it. But I definitely think the recovery was a huge one for me, especially because I used to train before getting into bodybuilding. I was just training differently. My goals were obviously performance, and they were also just more about speed and agility in the surfboard. So I would train very differently. It was a lot of resistance training, but with bands and cables. It wasn't so much free weights or strength focus. So I've always trained. So that was the biggest thing I noticed, just recovery in general, because I would feel like I could train more when I made the transition. And a big one for me was I used to be a napper. Like, oh my gosh, every single day after a surf session, I would nap for 2 hours. I would have to recover before I would go for my next session or go and train with my trainer. Um, but that was something that I noticed immediately after a year of being vegan. I don't know what it was. I was no longer taking naps. And for me, that was like, whoa. Like,
Wow,
yeah, I was a huge napper. But those were like the biggest things I noticed as an athlete, just recovery in general.
that's crazy, not needing to take naps anymore after going from like 2 hours. And then that's awesome. So how has it been challenging for you as a physique athlete? You said you told Paul, like, I need to show everybody that it can be done, so don't treat me differently, basically, which I think is super cool that you did that. So how did that challenge you?
I just had to get a little bit creative in the kitchen because my first prep as a vegan, I did a high carb way. My metabolism was at a great starting point. I have never dieted my entire life. So I feel like my calories were a great place to do that. And, at the end of the day, it's all relative,
Mhm.
my maintenance was just completely different back then. So I was able to do it at a very high carb and high calorie way. However, when I started with Paul, I just wanted to challenge myself in a little different way. And I was looking for changes in my physique that maybe I was lacking through my diet. So when I went a more balanced approach and I was like, hey, let's increase my protein intake and let's just make this more balanced. So I started incorporating more fats and a little bit less carbs. So moderate carbs, a little bit more fat, and then higher protein. I just feel like I don't know. It did so good for me. Like it was more maintainable for my lifestyle. And it was nice challenge because that way I could be like, hey, like there's no there's no magical vegan numbers, because I get a lot of the questions of like, what are your vegan macros? And I'm like, well, there's no such thing. Like, you can really build them however you want, or however your coach wants, you know, as long as you're meeting your protein and your fat needs. Like the carbs are kind of like the, you know, the factor that we move around basically in a fat loss phase. But yeah, it was just about just getting really creative with my food. And once you figure out those high protein foods that are lower in carbs, and you can really much build anything, you know. So I actually made a post not too long ago. Well, actually it was last year where I told my favorite vegan proteins. And I felt like that was really helpful, because I felt like people were just constantly stuck on like, oh, she has to eat beans, you know?
Yeah.
The proteins. And when they saw that, they were like, oh no, she doesn't, you know, there's so many other plant sources of protein out there. So, but I didn't feel like it was too challenging once I found what worked.
Yeah, for sure. And I had watched some of your YouTube videos too, and I watched the one on your vegan story, and then you just have a lot of awesome resources on your YouTube, and including things for competitors like your own makeup, your own tan, and all of that. And this is kind of random, but how did you plan accordingly as an amateur to make sure you were ready on time to hit the stage with the right tan and the right makeup and the right look, knowing that you were in control of all of those things?
So I started doing my own tan and my own makeup on my third show, after having not so great experiences with the show tanners. And just like, you know, I'm sure everybody has experiences, like all the competitors at one point or another, where they got their makeup done and they're like, oh my gosh, this is not what I wanted. Because they kind of keep it to a surprise. They don't let you peek in between. They keep it all the way to the end, a surprise. And then you're like, whoa, I'm stuck with it. So I was like, at that time, I was doing MPC and NFF. And for those that don't know, NFF was a natural federation in Texas. So I was actually a pro in that federation before I competed before I became an IFBB pro. So it was my pro debut with that federation. And I was like, you know, I want to be in control of everything, and I'm going to learn how to do my own hair and makeup. But at that time, and my tan, at the time, there was no resources. This was in 2017. I looked so many YouTube videos and I couldn't find anything. I'm like, I'm just going to make my own. But I actually follow a Jeffree Star tutorial.
That's awesome.
Full glammed, and it worked out. And then as far as the tan, I literally followed it to the T. And I practiced beforehand too. I practiced a couple of weeks beforehand to see that that was the shade that I wanted. And honestly, like show day, that was the most stress-free show day ever. So from then on out, very rarely I would get my makeup done, only if I knew that there was a person that I trusted and that I liked. But yeah, tanning for me was like, yeah, I'm doing it my own, because you're on your own time. So, you know, I didn't have to wake up at 3 a.m. to get my makeup and then my tan. And then, no, I was waking up at 6 a.m. on my own time, you know, chilling. And it was just so stress-free that I was like, okay, I need to do this more often. So I made the YouTube videos to help others, because like I said, at that time, there was nothing.
Yeah, I recently tried the DIY kit myself and watched your video when I was trying it to make sure I could put it on right and it was doing everything well. And that was really helpful. So I'm glad that you're creating content like that. And I'm hoping, in my next show, it ends up proving to be less stressful. And I think it will, because when I looked at how it looked, it was just like you said, sometimes the experiences we have backstage aren't exactly what we want, and sometimes they're like on point. For me, the inconsistency wasn't worth the risk, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna try it myself. Makeup, no, I don't know that I could do that myself. I don't touch it. Yeah, I'm like, I'll outsource, but I have my friend do it and she's really good. She's on my team too. So anyway, that's besides the point. That's really cool that you have that, because it is a great resource for competitors. And your husband actually helps you to produce and create your YouTube videos now. So what is it like for you guys to work together on your brand as well as in both of your life endeavors as, a couple.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. When people ask me what I do, it's like I have to go down through a list because there's not just one thing that I do. I do a lot of things. And
Mm-hmm.
my husband's actually in the military. He's the helicopter pilot for the Coast Guard. So he has his own full-time job too. But the funny thing is that when we are in the weekends together, like we have fun by going to the gym. We have fun creating YouTube videos. You might think that's super weird, but that's how we bond. That's how we're both very creative people. We love constantly to create. And this is a way for us to do something together and help others along the way. And we had so much fun when we were doing Vlogmas. It was a little bit stressful because we had to do we committed to 2 to 3 videos a week, but it was so much fun. It's really cool. And his job is very stressful. So it's nice to have something that is just a creative, outlet for us.
Yeah, I love that. It's super cool to hear that, and I love seeing like a power couple to come together, and it's awesome that he also has his own thing and you do a lot of different things. And I know that you work from home. I do too, and I know how hard it can be sometimes to just take time off or take a moment to chill. So I saw in your Vlogmas that was something you were working on and didn't do the best at, but what do your days usually look like from start to finish?
Let me tell you, my New Year's resolution on doing better on that is completely terrible. Like I'm sucking so bad at it, especially now. But it's good to have it still in the back of my head. Okay, I need to do better.
Now it's on the podcast, so
Oh my gosh. Now it's hard because now we just purchased the gym. We purchased Forward, so my day starts off at 5 a.m. now.
mm-hmm.
I wake up, have my coffee, go to the gym, and check up on the classes and the coaches. Because for those that don't know, I own a functional fitness gym. So we have coaches that are there early training the athletes, and I wake up, I do that, show my face, and then I come back home. There's another class at 9 a.m., so I go back at 9 a.m. And by then, I try to train either after the 9 a.m. class and then come home and do the rest of my work, like anything that has to do with FitVeganChef or, Natalie Matthews posing or any of that throughout the day. Have my meals, and then I go back to the gym until 7 p.m.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's been it started, when I was at home only, it was very flexible. And now I have more, I had to change my training schedule and everything around the gym. But I don't mind it, honestly. I really, really have been enjoying this new adventure. It's another project, and we've been having so much fun with it.
What inspired you guys to buy it and go forward with that?
Well, the opportunity kind of fell into our laps. Like this gym that my husband was going to, it was about to close down, and the owner was selling it. And George and I have always talked about owning a gym or buying a gym on our last tour, because we move every 3 to 4 years because of the military. And so we always talked about it. And when the opportunity showed up, we were like, we would be stupid to pass it. And I was like, well, yeah, this was a dream, but I didn't expect it to happen this quickly. And we literally had to have the decision made in 3 days.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we took a big, big leap. But, I feel like George and I have always been that type of people where we don't ever close ourselves because it might be the bad timing, We
Right.
have open hearts, and we always, I don't know, we don't ever not do something because we're scared. If anything, that makes us do something even more. So we knew it was going to be a challenge because the place needed a lot of help and needed a lot of, it was shutting down for a reason. It just needed love and it needed new management, and it needed to be completely remodeled and start from scratch. So we took on that huge task, and honestly, it's been such a blessing. We've been having so much fun just creating this space for us, and now I get to prep at my own gym, which is going to be pretty wild.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
I love that.
We just had the grand opening last weekend and it went so nicely. And yeah, I'm just so grateful because we get to meet more people. And that was one of our biggest goals this year was let's just meet more people, make new friends, because we're always moving and we never get to make these connections. And yeah, it was now or never.
So are you guys done moving then? Are you California for good?
I wish that was the yes, but no, we still have one more tour after our 4 years is up here, but we just got here, so we got 4 years here. So yeah, we'll know what we're going to do when the time comes. Right now, we're not going to really stress about it, but we love it here. It's the first time that it has felt like home is when we moved here to California. Like we lived in Jacksonville, Houston, and Puerto Rico. And, even though I'm from Puerto Rico, like I just knew that wasn't where I was going to end up in, like I knew that I wanted somewhere else to live.
What brought you to the United States in the first place?
George, I was his little souvenir.
Oh my gosh. No way. Okay, wait. Tell me
Yeah.
more about that.
Yeah, so he just got stationed there because he's American. So he got stationed there. That was his first tour ever. And we met at a surf shop, of course. And then after we met, we went on a couple dates and literally like the rest is history. It was like when you know, we moved in pretty quickly together, kind of crazy. And yeah, we got married 4 years after, and now here we are. We're going to be 10 years together this year.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, I left Puerto Rico because of his job. So once his tour was over, we had to go to Jacksonville, Florida. And yeah, that's when that big leap happened. And that's when we got married.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And okay, so that is cool to hear about him and how I love how you said you were a souvenir. I think that's so cute. Um and it's amazing just to see you guys like your dynamic together. It's clearly very supportive, clearly very team oriented, and I know that a big reason you even got into bodybuilding was because of him. And looking back on your whole entire career in bodybuilding, it's interesting because you've always been a professional athlete. I mean, you started surfing, you became a professional in surfing as a teenager, and then you became a professional bodybuilder like 2 years ago. So have you noticed any elements of being a professional athlete as a surfer translate into now your life as a professional bodybuilder?
Oh, absolutely. So surfing is an amazing sport. It's like it teaches you so much patience. Like you have to literally like wait for the perfect wave. You have to sit there and patiently wait. So I feel like being patient is the name of the game with bodybuilding. You have to be
Mhm.
have to be patient to see results. You have to be patient to build. And, there are all these phases that I feel like just surfing in general gave me the perfect foundation, not just physically, because, I was fortunate enough that just by being an athlete for so long, I had a great foundation to start my bodybuilding career. So if you kind of think about it, I've been training, 15 years for this. So it was pretty nice to have that foundation to transition into this. And to be completely honest, with surfing, it's kind of like the younger crowd is the one that competes in the world tour and all of that. And I was like in my mid-20s. So when I transitioned into bodybuilding, it was just the perfect sport for me. I needed a competitive outlet. And when I moved from Puerto Rico to Jacksonville, a lot of my sponsors dropped me because they were like, hey, we want you to represent in the island. We don't really need representation in the United States. And I was like, oh, okay, well, let me go on and move on to the next thing, So when George introduced me to bodybuilding, I really fell in love with it. It was that new thing that, I would wake up every single day and get excited for. Like the gym became my new meditation time. And, I was actually good at it. I was really good at it. And and I loved it. I really, really still do. And I'm excited for next year and the years to come doing this, because I see myself, that's the difference. Like with surfing, I could be doing it competitively. I didn't see myself doing it forever. With this, I only see myself getting better with time.
Definitely. And I know you really want to hit the Olympia stage. So what's your strategy, or what are your plans to accomplish that?
Well, I took a whole year off from my last show. Last year, I cut my season short. So last year, it was my pro debut season. And looking back, I don't regret it, but I think I could have just taken that year off. I was really excited once I got my pro card and was itching to like just still get on stage. But honestly, I needed the time to build my body before I stepped on the pro stage. Those girls in the pro stage have a lot of muscle. And I just was lacking a little bit. To be honest, I just kept being the smallest girl on stage. Luckily, I have shape in my side. Like
Yeah.
a lot of balance between my lower and my upper half. So I'm really fortunate there, but I always would get the feedback like, you just need to be a little bit bigger. So yeah, I just needed to sit back and just take the time to build. And that's what I've been doing. Even with the injury setback, I really been focusing on just eating enough and building and really focusing on my training sessions and just treating it very intensely, with like intentional, like just going to
Yes.
the gym and making every single rep count. Like that's been so huge. And honestly, I see my body recomp over and over and over. And I've reached a point in my off season where I'm enjoying it so much that I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe prep is about to start in a few months. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a good place to be though, huh?
Oh yeah, it's exactly where I wanted to be at, because I did cut my season short at the end of last year because I was starting to get burnt out and really tired. And I was like, yeah, I mean, just showing up to a show looking like crap is not what I want. I've never been that person, so I'm not going to step on stage for the sake of stepping on stage. I want to step on stage to qualify for the Olympia, and I want to step on stage because I'm showing my best. And towards the end, I just knew that I wasn't going to show my best. So I took a step back. I've been building, and hopefully that's my biggest strategy, just time on my side.
For sure. I can say I took over a year off and it's paid off massively. Like I felt like the intention I brought into the gym, like you're mentioning, and in my eating and my training and just giving my body the time to restore, oh my gosh, it's made such a massive difference. Like my body just looks so different. So I can only imagine that being you and the type of person you are, it's going to be amazing. And I can't wait to see that unfold. And I know in this time you've been building, you also traveled a lot throughout all of 2019. You were traveling a ton. So how did you stay on top of your goals with your nutrition and your training while doing this?
I honestly don't know. I was a machine. I'm telling you, I get prep goggles and I just do it. I'm like, coach, how high do I need to jump? Like I'm that type of person. So I would plan a lot. Everything was so scheduled and regimented. And that's the only way that you can succeed while traveling. Now, I will say I did learn a lot from this year. And I mean, from this past year. The traveling in peak weeks, that wasn't smart. And I saw my physique, how it impacted my physique in one of the shows in particular. I went and did a photo shoot in Vegas, and then I was traveling back and forth to Houston, and this was all in peak week. So I got in a plane like 3 times in one peak week.
Wow.
And I was like, yeah, that wasn't smart. I kept saying yes to things and opportunities because, like I said, I'm just that type of person. But I need to like step back and really focus on just if I'm competing, that's what I need to do. I don't like saying no to things and like, letting my life pass and things like that. But when it's peak week, I feel like I should have just stayed at home and, rest. But yeah, like I said, we live and learn, but that's a big takeaway from last year. For sure. So I'm definitely trying to set myself up perfectly for this year and trying to get all my traveling done before I start prep. So I can really just laser focus on prep.
Definitely. And you're someone who has accomplished so much in your life. So you are someone who takes life by the horns. You grab life by the horns, whatever the phrasing is, and you continuously strive for more. And I love that about you, and I've admired that about you. So what do you think has contributed to your success? Like, do you have any habits that you feel support you in your growth and development every day, like mentally, emotionally, or, anything relative?
Well, I really love writing down my goals. I do that on a weekly basis, a monthly basis. I don't just do it when it's like a New Year's thing, It's something that I do all year round. And I think that really helps a lot. And just, I'm a planner. I'm a person that just needs to know when something's going to happen, and I have to have it in my calendar. And I think just being organized in my life has helped me a lot to just, keep doing the things that I love, and not just, I focus on so many different things because all of those things are my passion. And like I said before, I just don't like saying no to new opportunities and new adventures because, life is so short. So I just want to do everything that like excites me. And yeah, I think just being organized overall.
Definitely. I think too, when you have so much going on in your life, it's really a non-negotiable if you want to continue to grow in your success.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So, I want to talk about just you as a chef as well, because this is a huge part of who you are. And we've talked a lot about like kind of the background behind that and who, just Natalie as a whole. But your website has a ton of amazing recipes to choose from, I noticed, and lots of cool things to try. So I'm going to ask you a potentially controversial question. Um, your cookbook was inspired by your favorite recipes as a kid or your favorite meals as a kid. Do you have a favorite recipe in your cookbook?
Ooh. That's like asking somebody who their favorite child is.
Yep.
It depends on the day. Honestly, I go through phases where I'm just obsessed with something and I'll cook it until I get tired of it. I'm sure a lot of people can relate with that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Geez, that's a hard one.
That's okay. Is there one that you find like you're like, oh, you got to try this?
Yes, I would say the pasteles one. So pasteles, I actually made a video on Vlogmas about the pasteles. So it's a whole recipe video. It's a traditional Puerto Rican recipe. It's very similar to tamales, but the process is very different and the ingredients are different. It's just kind of like the end result kind of looks like a tamale, but it tastes very different. It's very unique. I don't feel like any other culture has anything like it. And I was able to veganize it and simplify the recipe a lot because I remember my grandma spending over 48 hours just doing this thing.
Wow.
And I can do it now in less than an hour. So I did a cookbook. I did a video on it. And a lot of people were like, I cannot believe that you simplified it so much and how quickly you do it. Because everybody in Puerto Rico knows that their abuelitas were doing it for days at a time. But yeah, pasteles is my favorite one. And we have it through Christmas and the holidays.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that you were able to do that, and literally, I just think it's so cool too that your cook was inspired by your childhood favorites. I think that's so sweet and smart and awesome that you can share that love with other people as well. And I'm always fascinated by chefs and cooks and dessert makers and just anyone who can do anything in the kitchen, because it's not my strong suit. It's not necessarily weakness, but it's not my strong suit. And so, it takes a lot of knowledge to be able to do what you just described that you did. And you did study at the Living Light Culinary Institute, and you graduated, or you became a raw chef and raw pastry chef from there in 2016. But before that, you were decorating cakes. So when did you know that being a chef or cooking or cake decorating was a passion of yours?
Well, like I said, I was always so creative and just kind of artistic in a way where I just needed to like have different outlets. And the whole cake decorating thing started when I started going vegan. And I was like, I developed this passion of being in the kitchen and learning about these new foods that I was learning to eat, and I wanted to prepare them differently. And when George and I moved from Puerto Rico to Jacksonville, I got the opportunity to become a cake decorator because I was self-taught and really good at it. And
Wow.
I became the lead decorator for the Jacksonville store in Whole Foods. And that was really fun.
That's awesome.
I did that for a couple of years. And then I was like, you know what? I don't see myself being in the store, like working at a grocery store for longer. I see myself having maybe a restaurant or doing a cookbook. Like I just wanted to be, I wanted to do something more. So I went to the Living Light Culinary Institute in Fort Bragg, California. And I learned so much about flavors and how to pair certain things with other things to give you this epic culinary experience. And I just, it opened up my mind so much that I was like, okay, so how do I combine all of this with my new love for veganism and bodybuilding and all of that? And I was like, I know I'm going to make high protein recipes and macro friendly recipes. Cause again, at that time when I started being vegan, like nobody was doing any of this. Like there wasn't any resources. So I wanted to be that resource for people. Like, hey, you can eat these amazing foods, feel good, and have them taste really good, and still hit your fitness goals. Like you can have fun in the kitchen. You don't have to eat boring things. Like, hey, I can still eat boring things, but make them look and taste really good, because food should be enjoyed. It shouldn't be a task, a chore, or something annoying,
Yeah.
So
Oh, I love that.
that's how it all started.
That's amazing. And how cool that you were self-taught. Then you go and get this job at a Whole Foods. You became a top decorator there. You're like, I want to do more for me and for the passions that I have. And then you go and you accomplish those kinds of things. And now you're really living that dream out and you're making that vision a reality. And it is your reality now. So that is just so awesome. And I've just loved talking to you today. And I feel so inspired by you.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
You're
it's
welcome.
kind of crazy looking back because I remember the whole FitVeganChef name came at Living Light Culinary Institute. Like
Wow.
the girls there were trying to help me. It was when I was creating my Instagram account and they were helping me pick a name, and they were like, well, you like fitness, you like this, let's just do FitVeganChef. So the FitVeganChef account started as a food blog, and it evolved into an athlete account basically. And yeah, it's crazy to look back and think, wow, I remember having that conversation in the kitchen. Oh, what's my name going to be on Instagram? Because back then you didn't put your name like
Right.
some people do now. You had to have a cool name. So
Hey, that's a pretty cool name. I think that's awesome. It's become your brand.
yeah. So yeah, it's crazy to see how little things in life that you just don't realize like could have a whole ripple effect in your future. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like I like to believe, and I choose to believe, and I see because it's been proven to me over and over again in my own life. Like I've been prepared for every next thing I accomplished by the last thing that I went through or experienced. And I didn't even realize it at the time. At the time it might have been one idea or one thing, and then it shows up later in my life. And I'm like, oh, it's like that whole everything happens for a reason thing. It's like that. It just unfolds beautifully.
Yeah, it's magical. It's really cool.
I love that. So I would love to hear your best advice for girls who have never competed but want to compete, and then your best advice for girls who are on their road to pro.
So for a first timer, and I got this one from my coach, is that you should go to a show and go and watch it first. And that should be your number one homework. And really go and watch it, just because I feel like there's people that either get turned off by it or they absolutely come inspired out of a show. And you have to know that when you start prep, you have to start it for you and for the right reasons, not doing it for anybody else or because it's cool or anything like that. So definitely recommend you to watch a show, see if it's something that you actually want to pursue, because it's really hard. It's super rewarding, but it is challenging. It's hard. You're going to dedicate a lot of your time to it, money and energy. So you want to make it count, and you want to, you want to do good. Like nobody enters a show to just do a show, they want to do good. So I always say, like, make it worth your time and do it right. And then my second advice to that person would be just take the time to build a foundation. If you never have done weights in your life, build a foundation before you start a prep. I feel like so many girls start straight into a prep and then they're like, oh, I don't know why I didn't have muscle, or they're just go on stage very skinny looking, and it's because they never took that time to actually build their bodies before actually hitting the stage and going into a dieting phase. So I feel like that was something that helped me. I reaped the benefits tremendously because I went into a building phase before I ever did a show. I did it for a whole year before I decided to do a competition, and I feel like that helped me a lot. And then for the girls that are going for their pro card, I would say be patient. Be patient, because if you're trying and it's not happening, I promise your time will come. You just have to know and trust that when that time comes, it will be the right time. You haven't gotten it yet because it's not your time yet.
That's really reassuring and just awesome advice. And again, I appreciate you coming on and sharing so much about you and your background and the lessons you've learned, as well as lots of great insight into amazing recipes, ideas, being vegan, transitioning to being vegan is just amazing. And I appreciate who you are and what you represent. And I would love for everybody to be able to connect with you if they haven't yet. Maybe even reach out to you for posing or for help or other recipes or how to get your cookbook, all that. So can you share with us the best way to get in contact with you?
Absolutely. So my Instagram is FitVeganChef, or it'll appear if you just type in Natalie Matthews. I do offer posing classes. One of my biggest passions is posing. I don't know how I ended up being really good at it, but this girl that never has worn heels before, she started bodybuilding, actually is good in heels. So I love posing, and I love teaching people all the do's and don'ts that I've learned over the years. So you can go on my website, FitVeganChef.com, and there's a little tab that says post with me there, and that's where you can see my availability and all of that. There's also a tab where you can find all my favorite macro-friendly recipes. And then if you need more inspiration and more recipes and want to know more about competing and all of that, and how it kind of looks like in the life of a vegan athlete, you can go to my YouTube channel, and that's Natalie Matthews.
Perfect. I'm going to make sure all of that is on the show notes page. So to everybody listening, you can find all those links at celestial.fit/podcast. As always, if you are listening to this episode right away, Natalie is going to be right at the top. If you're listening to it down the road, couple Fridays later, just scroll to the category section and click on her name, and you're going to be able to find all that too. Thank you guys so much for listening. Natalie, thank you again for your time and coming on to talk with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm so excited we finally made it happen.
Me too. And to many more, and amazing success and everything that you're doing. I'm here for you. And also, I love it because we're not too far away from each other. So I'm going to have to come check out this gym and say hi to you.
I would love to have you over. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. And I hope you all have an amazing rest of your day, night, or morning, wherever you are in the world while you're listening to this